All right, all right. Well, I want to welcome everyone. If you're new to Jack's Church, we really want to extend a welcome to you as well. I'm so glad when even family comes into town. I know Keen and Joan's parents are on the way back, and it's great to see them. And it's great to have family. And if you're watching online, I really want to extend a warm welcome to you as well. You know, this morning, I have an idea that's been brewing in my head that I've been wanting to talk about for many, many years. And I want to bring you guys into that conversation. Is that okay this morning? I think that this idea will help us get going in the right direction, and it's going to help make our Sundays better the way that God intended it to be, and it's going to reflect Him better the way we do church on Sundays. And I think it's going to help solve a problem that's been plaguing churches for about 1,700 years. So if we were able to accomplish a little bit of that this morning, going in the right direction, would you guys be excited about that? All right, well, let's get going. So in order to do that, we're going to do it conversation style, but I also called yesterday two of my friends to invite them up to kind of help me out here, to chime in their thoughts every once in a while. And so I want to, if you could, give a warm welcome to Travis Albritton and Yvette Len. Please come on up here. Just go ahead and grab your mic when you want. You know, a little background on me while they're getting settled. Even this might help to understand what prompted this talk. I've been in ministry and helping build churches for over 2 decades. And I've been in churches of all sizes. I've been in a church that grew to 10,000. I have been on the mission field in Central America in a church. I helped, basically my wife and I planted a church that was a house church. And we saw that grew to 60 people and become self-supporting and grow out of the house church phase. And then I've pretty much been every church size in between, the 250, the 550, 3,000. And so I've seen a lot of different churches, but there's been one thing that's been a little bit like have you ever gotten like a stone in your shoe before, like a little pebble? And you're trying to walk and everything, but it's just so, and it might be a little pebble, but any pebble in your shoe, if you're stepping on it, is really bothersome, isn't it? And that's kind of the background for this talk, because I think what I've seen on Sundays has been like the little pebble in a sense. And it's been exacerbated because our society has trended towards Sundays becoming more and more of a focal point for a lot of things. And so that's what we want to talk about today, and we want to talk about an idea on how to solve that. So guys, thanks for joining me up here.
Thank you.
All right. I think that we can kick this conversation off with talking about what, as humans, as people, we really desire deep down in our hearts about life. Like, what are some things that you think that, and you guys can be thinking too, what do you think we really desire as people?
I'd say, as a person, I desire connection with other people, that God put us on this planet together as His creation to connect with each other, so connection.
Okay.
I was going to say bread, but her answer is...
Like bagels? Or?
Yeah, like pizza
okay.
or something.
All right,
nice.
nice.
So I think just in general, relationships and family and feeling like we're a part of something that's bigger than ourselves is something that I definitely identify with.
Okay, great. By the way, they only have a general sense of what I'm going to talk about, so I don't even know what they're going to say, so this is going to be good. Or it's going to be a train wreck. It's going to be one of the two things, but just anyways. I believe that. What I wrote down was, I think we want to be known. We want people to know us. We want God to know us. We want to be loved. And I think we also want to be transformed, too. I think we want to be the best version of ourselves. I agree with everything you guys are saying as well. That connection that you're talking about. And that's going to lead into what we're going to talk about. Don't you guys think that the church should be the perfect place for these things? That the things that God has put the deepest in our heart, like if you're in high school and you're insecure or middle school, or if you're, 45 and insecure, however old you are, that the church should be the most perfect place to come and have the desires of your heart be fulfilled. And yet, at least for Sundays, I see there's like a great chasm on Sundays between being known, loved, and transformed. Because, tell me if this resonates with you. If you were to show up to church a half an hour late, how much did it really matter? It's kind of an unpleasant thought that it wouldn't matter, right? But how much would it matter? What if you didn't come? What if you just live streamed? How much does your presence during the service time make a difference? In the modern church format. Now, I know we've been doing some different stuff, in Jack's church, so we'll talk about that. But in the modern church format, it's more like you're going to a sporting event. Anybody been to some good concerts lately? Okay. What concert have you been to? Ooh, Lifehouse and Switchfoot. Good stuff. Okay. So, but if you didn't go to that concert, Lifehouse and Switchfoot, they keep playing, right? You don't really contribute. Or did you sing on stage? I don't know. You wish you could? Okay. It doesn't really make all that much of a difference usually. If you go to a Jaguars game, whether you go or not, they're going to keep playing. I don't really see that as being the model that God has set out for us in the scriptures. And in 1 Corinthians 12, I want to read 1 Corinthians 12:12, and if you can turn your Bibles, we're not going to use the screens today in our kind of little conversational talk, but I want to talk about this, and you can listen if you don't have a Bible, and just absorb. But in 1 Corinthians 12:12, it reads, "Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by the one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we are all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many." So what sticks out to you guys about this passage?
Well, just the idea that this metaphor of the human body, and we all kind of know subjectively from our own experience of living in our body that the parts that you don't necessarily think about all the time, they definitely show up when they're hurting, or when something's wrong, or when you don't feel well. When you got a stomach bug, you recognize your stomach is there because it's hurting. And so,
Splinter in your pinky,
absolutely, stubbing your toe on a door, things like that.
Okay.
And going along with that, all my body parts are connected. Because if one part gets disconnected, I would definitely know that it's missing.
Oh, you would. I think Mission Impossible came out, and Tom Cruise did this thing where he jumped over a chasm and he broke his ankle, and I'm pretty sure he felt that it was disconnected.
I would feel that.
Yeah. Paul is painting this beautiful picture of the church. And he's saying that all the parts matter. And we've been talking a lot about being a multicultural church, about the diversity that we have in our church and how to get every part understanding and aware of each other. So whether it be races or culture or men and women, or whether it be generations, in our society, in America at least, we have a bad habit of as you get older, you get less relevant. But that's not how it was in Jesus' time. It was the opposite, actually. And all generations should care for one another and reach down and reach up and help each other. And then rich and poor. Everybody's together and everybody matters. It's such a beautiful picture. And then he says in verse 15, "Now if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be?" Could you imagine if your whole body was just an eye?
Mike Wazowski.
Oh, exactly. Mike Wazowski. Yeah, that would be terrible. That would be terrible. And you would be so limited. And so it is with the church. We all have different gifts and abilities. And part of this is what I don't like is that, and on Sunday, it starts to revolve around a very, very few. And you get a less of a sense of the painting of the glorious body that we have. And that's my little pebble. And so then in verse 24, he goes on to say, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so there should be no division of the body, but its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. What sticks out to you guys about that?
I always go back to the connection because I know I enjoy, if something is pleasurable, say something I ate, my whole body will rejoice with that. And a part of being connected in the body is that I'm in tune to that. I'm in tune to if something good happens to someone, as well as if something bad happens, I'm connected to them. So I know what's going on, or at least I'm cued to, wow, I need to go and investigate that further.
It's good. Like I ate cookies and cream ice cream last night, and I found a new one that's only 80 calories, and man, you're right. My whole body rejoiced. That's true.
Well, and I even love just the interactiveness that you see in the passage, and just how Paul's view of how the church is supposed to be is that we're so invested in each other's lives that we're all impacted by each of us. And so it's not that we're isolated in our little silos of existence, but that we're so interconnected that anything that happens in a faith community is going to have an impact, positive or negative.
Great point. And it's interesting because then Paul goes on to say after that, and you can read it, later. But in verse 27, he goes on to give different roles, leadership roles, teachers, and prophets, and apostles, and gifts of healing, and all this kind of stuff. And those things are crucial. Like leadership is crucial in church, and it's hard. It needs to be respected. It needs to be prayed for. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I need all the prayers and the support and the love because leadership is just hard. And if you've led as a manager or, your family, I mean, you just know leadership is hard. But even though that's true, that leadership needs to be respected and prayed for and loved, on the other hand, it's not the whole picture. And see, part of the problem is that on Sundays in our modern church, a lot of times it can become almost like hero worship in a sense, like where the leaders are doing the work and they're the ones up front and whatever. That's just not the picture that I see. In fact, if you go back to verse 24, when he says, when Paul says God has put the body together, that verb put in the Greek, synke ranimi, it is hard to translate from the Greek because it's more of an image of a painter mixing paints together, blending to make something beautiful. Or of like someone who's a composer of music creating these harmonies. Have you ever heard a song before and all these harmonies are like weaving together? Like the Backstreet Boys or something? That's what you were thinking, right? Yeah, I thought so. But those harmonies are just playing together. It's just beautiful. And that's the church. It's like this beautiful painting. And that's what I believe should come out on a Sunday. And in fact, I've been reading this book. Dane, who's awesome here in Jack's church, gave this to my wife Carla, In the Likeness of God. And in it, it talks about how cells in the body really are meant to help the body, that every cell should contribute to the body. And there's only really two types of cells that he listed that don't contribute, that are independent, that exist in the body, but they're independent. Do you know what they are? Parasites and cancer cells. So it's almost like there's this picture that we are meant to be a part contributing into the body, or if we're not, if we're just here, if we just show up and feed off of the energy or feed off of the benefits of, but we don't contribute, it's almost like we're parasites or cancer cells. That we don't want to be that, right? But we also need a way that we can contribute. And I don't believe it just needs to happen at Growth Group. I don't believe it just needs to happen outside of Sundays. I want to, this is my little pebble. I want to see this start happening more in Sundays. So let's talk about the first century churches, because I think that it didn't start out this way. And what do you guys know about the first century churches, like the spirit of it and the way that they did things?
Well, we see in the book of Acts that they met together constantly. And sometimes it was in the temple and larger gatherings, but most of the time it was just in people's homes, going home to home and talking about Jesus and living out this new faith that they had together and just exploring what it looks like to be following Jesus instead of following the old covenant.
Okay.
And they shared things in common. So when they did meet together, sharing things in common really connected them to allow them to be more intimate, not only with God, but also with each other through that sharing.
Yeah, there's just a lot of engagement, a lot of participation, a lot of blending, a lot of mixing, right? Do you guys read that, like Acts 2:42 and these different passages? And so the question then is, in fact, actually, one other thing I want to mention is that you would never say in the first century, I'm going to church. Because the word is ecclesia in the Greek, right? So ecclesia means the people, okay, the gathering. So going to church would be like me after church I'm going to family, guys. Like, I'm going to family. Like, no, like it's the people together, never the building itself. So then what happened? What happened from that time to now that church feels and looks so much different, that there's not the interaction, not the engagement? And I think a lot of us love, even in school and different stuff, we like to participate. So what happened? Well, about 300 AD, there was a divergence. And something changed. And I want to do a little historical jaunt here, if you could humor me for a second, because I know that, who loves history? Raise your hand if you love history. Okay, raise your hand if you fall asleep during history. Okay, for the fall asleep people, wow, the whole teen ministry? What's going on? Who's your history teacher? This is horrible. We need to change this. I don't know how to feel about that. Okay. Well, please, just stay awake for this one little part, okay? Because it's really important. It's really important. So, what do you guys know about Constantine?
He was a Roman emperor, and he had a big impact on the Christian movement specifically.
Okay.
I recognize the name and know that he instituted a lot of churches, or at least structures.
Okay.
He changed the structures.
Great answer.
Constantinople, you found that?
Istanbul, Constantine. Yeah, so basically, I told these guys, if they don't know, it's okay, because when you say, I'm not really sure about something, that represents about most of us in the audience half the time, right? But you see what I said? Audience. That's a mistake. That is a mistake. I just caught myself, because it's not supposed to be an audience. Anyways, that's my pebble. And Constantine started that whole thing, and we're going to talk about that because he wanted to try to get the Christians out of this minority despised status that they were in. They were not in a good status. And so he started building these big buildings, these big temples for the Christians. And that about 312, when he became the Caesar of the Western Empire, that's when he started doing these buildings. And it was to compete with what? Roman temples, the pagan temples. I mean, these pagan temples were enormous, and they were big, and they were beautiful, and they were the majority status. I mean, they were worshiping their gods, and they had all this majesty with these buildings, and he's like, you know what, we're gonna match that. And the Jews as well, you know, they had their share of temples. And so he started trying to promote Christianity, but you know, it's reputed that Constantine never gave up worshiping the sun god. And the problem is, when he built these buildings, the way he built it was to match the way that the Roman leaders would present to their audiences. And so the buildings that he created were patterned after the basilicas, which were kind of like high school auditoriums with the rows. And so it was for somebody to be on a stage presenting to a docile, passive audience that did not interact. And that was the start of rows. Before that, there were not rows. Because do you have rows in your living room? How weird would that be? unless maybe you have a movie theater or something like that, living room. But other than that, and even then, movie theaters are not designed for interaction, right? So that's the whole point. You don't have that. You have couches. It's in a circle. And in a 2018 climate, 1,700 years later, we are still operating off of that divergence of the early church. That is kind of interesting, right? Middle school ministry, is that halfway interesting to you right there? They said somewhat. Okay. I think the next part will be better. Okay. Let's be honest, though. Rose, sometimes we like Rose, though, don't we? It plays our sinful nature a little bit. Tell me what you guys think about that. Why do we like Rose sometimes?
Rows make it really easy to be invisible. It doesn't matter if you're here, and it doesn't matter how much you engage because you're just another face in the crowd. And so it's nice to sometimes just be selfish at church and just come to receive and to be entertained in a sense and to be fed. And so that can be really appealing.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It's easier to hide that way. So if I'm coming in with the intent to not participate, or I've been trained to do that, then it's easy to hide.
Yeah, exactly. And it is nice to hide sometimes, right? Let's be honest. I mean, we're having a bad day, or, we fought in the minivan on the way over or something. But it's kind of weird, though, in that. Because instead of being like a family, it's almost like you come to church to put your best foot forward sometimes. So you could be yelling your head off in the minivan, and then you get out, like, kids, put a smile on your face, and here you are at church. And there's a disconnect from who you are and what's going on in your life and what you experience in church. And yet we said at the beginning that church should be the best place for you to be you and you to be real and honest. And I think, and this is the part that I think this section especially will appreciate, but all of us will appreciate, I think we do desire to be real. And I think we desire for people to accept us for who we are and also help transform us into who we can be. But can we do that on a Sunday? See, Rose, we've been trained to love Rose. So it would be weird to not be in Rose. But that's not how it always was. And it's to our detriment because it hinders us. Rose hinder us from being known, loved, and transformed. This is so hard to have blending. So hard to be contributing. How much, you can't even see the person behind you. Who's behind you right now? Go ahead and look at the person behind you. Bet you didn't even know. Hope you weren't scared. All right. Rose set us up to fail. Why? Because you're a fan in the stand, you're not a player on the team. And we need to overturn that because that's not the beautiful picture that Paul painted the church. That's not the work of the church. The work of the church is the one another scriptures. Have you ever studied out the one another scriptures before? I think you did actually, Travis, right?
Yeah, not too long ago. Yeah, so there's actually 59 verses in the New Testament that talk about this one another or one another ring. And there's some broader themes that you see as you study these out. One of the big ones is the commitment to love one another and all the different facets of how that looks and what those interactions look like. The commitment to unity is about a third of them. About 20 verses are about being committed to being unified, about being together and living out this faith community as a single entity, as one body. And then humility is another huge theme in the one another passages, humbling ourselves before one another, serving one another, washing each other's feet, symbolically, as Jesus did with his apostles. So just really seeing the substance of what church is supposed to be played out over the New Testament.
That's great. Let me read some one another passages, and you ask yourself if when you hear this and absorb it, if it's in sync with Rose. James 5, James, first pastor of the Jerusalem church, he says in James 5:16, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Confess your sins to the priest, the leader? No, to each other. Another pastor said in Hebrews 10:24, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. We may spur one another on, that there's interaction, there's blending, there's helping. In verse 25, he goes on, he says, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. How much can you encourage one another in rows? Is it set up for victory there? And all the more as you see the day approaching. What about what Paul says in Galatians 6:1? Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently, but watch yourselves or you may also be tempted. If someone is caught in a sin, how would you even know if someone's caught in a sin? You didn't even know who was behind you, right? I mean, how much interaction and mixing is there to build the relationships that are needed to even know if someone's caught in a sin? Because there has to be enough of a foundation. Like I don't know if you're caught in a sin, and I'm sorry. I wish I did, and you're feeling very awkward right now, and I understand that. Are you? No, don't answer that. Okay, and the reason is because it's just too impersonal. It's too shallow. This format. Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Romans 15:7, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. This feeling of acceptance and love. I mean, that's what we desire, don't you guys think? What do you think of it?
We do. We definitely desire to have our burdens shared with us. We desire to be loved. We desire to be healed from confessing our sins. So all those things are definitely things that I would want, especially would want from a church body.
Yeah. You agree, Travis?
Yeah, well, and it's just exhausting trying to do everything on your own, you know? Like, it's just, we need people to help us.
Yeah.
You know, if we're all really honest, even those of us that like to put on a good face and say, no, I can do it by myself and be independent, at the end of the day, we know that we need other people. And so it's so important to have those kind of relationships and to have that here, where we know that this is the deepest we can get with each other and be truly honest and authentic.
You guys are about to have a baby.
Yes.
8 days.
8 days.
8 days. 8 days.
We'll need lots of help from you guys.
And you shall have it. I just think this is to the glory of God that we build these kind of relationships, isn't it? Are you guys with me here? It's like a spiritual Cheers, minus the alcohol. You know, if you know that show, I know, do you guys know that reference, Cheers? Okay, all right. Minus the alcohol, but it's like everybody knows your name, and when you need the help, and you can contribute to that, and you can get that help. So how do we get to that kind of a church? How do we get to a real church on Sundays like that? Because it's going to happen in several layers, right? Sunday is one layer, and it's an important layer, but it's not the only layer. To be honest, if it's the only layer, it won't work. You have to have smaller circles. Even growth groups don't really always get small enough of a circle. You have to have deep relationships outside of even growth groups. So, but Sundays is an important layer that builds towards the other layers. If it's done, I think, the way God designed it to be. And there's always going to be pros and cons of how we do Sundays. And there's pros and cons of mega churches and pros and cons of house churches. Okay, let's talk about that for one quick second. What are some pros and some cons of mega churches model?
Well, I would think that model, you have so many people, and even if it's designed the best that it could be, just the sheer magnitude that is that many people, and you don't get a chance to connect. I know even sometimes going to large conventions like FDC, on that last day, there's so many people there. And to me, it just feels a lot like a concert, and that's nice for it to have all the saints gathered together. But for my day-to-day, week-to-week, I much rather appreciate a smaller group because it's easier for me to connect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and larger churches definitely have more resources available,
yep.
Right? So like, they put on some killer VBSs.
Yeah.
And so it's great to have those resources, but but that is only one piece of the larger picture of what a church is supposed to be. And so I think that has to be, if you're in a larger church, you have to find a way to shrink it down to a more manageable size, because you can't manage 5,000 relationships. You'll just drive yourself nuts.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote down pros of mega church is that they can reach a lot of people at once, a lot of resources, great music on Sundays, and there's other things too. But the cons I wrote is that it's impersonal and shallow. There's a production feel, like being entertained, come and sit back. You're a spectator, very, very low participation. And there can be speaker worship where you feel a real connection with a talented speaker. And you feel like you know them, but you don't actually know them. And then you might not have other real relationships. So if that speaker leaves, you leave because you didn't really have any real relationships. Now, a lot of people think that house church is like the ultimate solution. I've been a part of house church before, and I think there's pros and cons to everything. What are some pros of house church?
Pros, of course, the intimate connection, and you're going to be in an environment in someone's living room. So a much smaller environment, there's nowhere to hide. So if you're really going to be connected with that particular group, then you can't help but get close to the people. You're going to be missed the very first time you're not there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But then because it's so small...
Wait, I'm staying on the pros.
Oh, okay, awesome. House churches are great.
Okay.
No, they are great. So
do you have another pro or no?
Yes. So being in a smaller group, it forces you to grow. It forces you to step outside of your comfort zone, because it's like there's 12 of us. Somebody has to lead songs. You can clap in rhythm. You're the song leader now, right? That may have happened to me at one point, and so it forces you to grow in ways, and it kind of accelerate your spiritual maturity in a way that you wouldn't have if you were in a larger group.
Good point. Yeah, you can do things like have meals together. You're a little bit more agile, okay? And there are some great things about house church. I really do love house church in many ways. Some cons, though, are the singing can be more lacking. Just being honest, I enjoy the singing when we have, more talent there. So sometimes, I know a lot of times we say, what's the scripture we say? Make a joyful noise. Okay, but not all noises are totally joyful. I'm going to be honest with you.
They might be joyful to sing, but not joyful to listen to.
Yeah, that's a good point. But keep singing, though. Keep singing. I'm not trying to dissuade you. Also, logistics. I've had many people come to me before who are hosts, and they've said, we're exhausted week after week. Our house is torn apart. I had one person say to me, my doorknobs are falling off, from the amount of people. I've had another person say their couches got destroyed and all this kind of stuff. And so week after week of being a host, it's a lot of work. And then the teaching, it's not always easiest too, because you're trying to create different lessons, and it falls on the host a lot of times, or a few individuals. And so, but I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying there's always pros and cons. Like, I love house church. I'm just saying nothing on a Sunday is going to be the perfect answer, but I think we're trying to achieve 1 Corinthians 12. So I've been meditating a lot about our size, because the 1 to 300 range, the 100 to 300 range, is kind of right in the middle. And I think if you do it wrong, you have the worst of all worlds. It's like you have a mega church model, but you don't actually have all the resources, and you don't have all that. But I think if you change the game, you have something special that can be created that I haven't really seen done very much at all. If I've never actually been a part of something, and I've searched for it even, but I haven't seen it, and I've been meditating on this for like 10 years and looking for it. We're kind of like the Goldilocks church. Just right. There's a certain special dynamic that happens between 100 and 300 people. If you go beyond that, it's very difficult. And in fact, sociologically, they've proven in studies that after 120 people in a group, you cannot sustain like more relationships past that. So even as you extend beyond 120, you're starting to lose touch with different parts of the group. But I think I have an idea, that we have been talking about in the leadership group for the last year, which I'm very excited to unveil today. And I know that this can be different because we've done it here, camping. Guys, how much do you love our camping trips? Oh yeah. We had like almost 300 people, I think, at this last camping trip, and we were in this horseshoe shape. We're feeling together. We're feeling bonded. We're feeling connected. It's like Acts 2:42, where they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, the breaking of graham crackers and prayer, and they shared everything they had with each other. Like we shared all of our marshmallows with each other. This was first century Christianity right there. But there was a family feel. And if you've been coming on the Friday nights, you know in Matthew 22:37, we've been talking about the bullseye for Jack's church that we're aiming at is intimacy with God. And then around it is following Jesus and helping and loving each other. That's Matthew 22:37, the greatest command. Loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Everything you have. That's different than just like showing up to a church on a Sunday. That's where we're trying to get, and we're trying to do it together. We experience a lot of that there. Did you guys have a good time on the camping trip?
I love the camping trip.
Yvette, are you
Yes.
a camper?
I've
Or a
twice.
glamper,
I've
or a
gone twice.
glamper.
It took me a while to get into the whole, I'm not a camper girl, but so many people were talking about it that's what convinced me about how special it was and how it was a time to really get to know each other a lot better over a period of time. So the last 2 times we've gone.
Nice. So we've been trying to take this feel and this vibe and insert it into Sundays. And you've seen some of the changes, right? We have the Catchbox mic, and it's been great when we're able to share together and we're able to inspire each other because there's that blending that happens. You guys like the Catchbox mic? Okay. Marcus, you have it? Okay, Marcus. Okay. Great. We're not right now, but I just want to make sure you're on the ready. The Catchbox mic could come from anywhere. And we've been having the speakers come down off a stage. So we're trying to break that dynamic, make it a two-way street. I mean, today is a good example of that. Do you guys like when Steve and Carla shared last week? And it's very refreshing, right? People are blending more. People are sharing, contributing their thoughts, reading scriptures to each other more, washing each other with scriptures. It's not just all about leader guy or preacher guy. Trying to break that dynamic. And so I think we've been trying to do that, and we've had more people sharing than ever before, and I think we've been seeing the results. I mean, so many of you guys have come up to me and said, this is refreshing. Like, I'm so happy to feel this direction the way that we're going. But there's still one thing left that is a pebble in the shoe. And we had an architect come in, and I told him the idea of what I wanted to do, and he doesn't even go to church, and he thought it was the most amazing idea, so I was like, okay, that's encouraging. But we had him mock up this concept, and I want to present to you the way that we can overturn what has been happening for 1,700 years since Constantine into something different. It's called the living room church. I wish I had epic music, but maybe somebody could beatbox for me. So this is the living room church right here. As you can see, it's in a U so that people are, yeah, thank you, yes, I need that beat. It's in a U so we're able to actually face each other. We're able to feel connected to each other. I mocked this up and did a prototype of this at the Florida Leadership Retreat with about 100 people, and it felt awesome. We felt connected to each other. We felt engaged, and it was one of those things where you feel like, wow, I matter. I'm here. If you show up late, you'll matter more than before. So, what do you guys think? You like that? Yeah? So we have 300 axes outside, and we're going to take out the pews right now. No, just kidding. We don't have the axes, but you will matter. You will matter. And that's awesome. Unless you're a late person all the time. And then you might not be as encouraged. But, so, what are your thoughts about the physicals? Because one thing before you comment, if you ask an architect, say, hey, I want you to design me a building, you know what they're going to almost definitely say? They're going to say, well, what do you want to do with the space? How do you want me to design it? For what purpose? With what end goal? And that's the reason. We want to be intentional. Traditions are good, and I'm not saying rows are 100% bad. Like I said before, everything has its strengths. But at the end of the day, if we're trying to achieve 1 Corinthians 12:12, where we're blending together, then we need to make this serve us, this physical space serve us, and not us serve this physical space. Thoughts and comments?
My first comment, as a matter of fact, Frankie and I were here on Friday night, and we got a chance to see this model. And the first thing he said to me was, where would you sit? And I thought, I like the chairs facing each other. And I said, that's where I want to sit. Because I like to see faces. And I am so encouraged by Dane, who just turns around to view everybody and encourage everybody. And that would encourage me so much. I would feel more connected. I would be able to see the expression on someone's face. She looks like, something's going on there. I need to connect with her after service to make sure she's okay, she or he. So I would enjoy sitting across.
Okay.
Well, the thing that I really like is the open space in the middle, where it'll feel more intimate even during the sermon, during the teaching portion, right? So it's not somebody far away on a stage. It's in your midst.
Yeah.
It's right in front of you, right? It's an interactive feel to it. And so I love that. And then I also just, whenever I think about change can be hard, especially when you've been doing something for a long time. Something I always have to remind myself is to not miss the forest for the trees, to not miss out on the big picture of the main point of why we're coming to church for the sake of trying to preserve some things that are familiar. And it's challenging. It's not easy to just say, all right, we're going to do something new, something totally different. But I think if you really understand, the goal is intimate connection with God and with each other, then I think this is a great step in that direction.
Awesome. And I know that about half of us are introverts. And sometimes something like that could look scary because you're asking yourself, am I going to be put on blast every Sunday morning? I just want to find a place to hide. It's designed so there are places to hide there, okay? And when I say hide, you know what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you're not like on the front row. And, it's okay. We're going to be asking if you want to participate at different times in different things, but not forcing people to do that. And I think it's going to be a great blend, just like you would in your living room. That's why it's called the living room church model. Because when you're in a living room with someone and a group of people, it feels comfortable. It feels like casual. It feels the ability to connect with other people. And so if you're an introvert, don't be scared. Don't be scared, and it's going to be okay. And if you're an extrovert, that's great because you'll get a chance to share too. Most of the speaking will happen, all the speaking rather, will happen on the floor. I envision like Anakin would be, and maybe some of the singers would be on the floor. The musicians would still be on the stage. We want to put like a baptistry, kind of maybe in the stage that would be like a beautiful wooden baptistry that then you would be on wheels and you could kind of roll out right in the middle. And then when someone gets baptized, their whole spiritual family is around just celebrating. Tell me that wouldn't feel great. I'm so stoked about that. So I want to take a few moments to just hear your thoughts. And before we pray for communion, maybe James Salter, lead off with you, and then why don't you just throw it, James, to whoever, and let's just take a few minutes to hear what you guys think. Nice catch.
Y'all hear me? Okay. When Jonathan first presented this a while ago, I thought it was really a great idea. I still do. And, being part of the Church of Christ for so many years, you think, okay, is there a biblical basis for that? So I thought about 1 Corinthians 14. I want to read it.
Suitable helper.
It's a great helper right there.
See how we help each other, one another?
What then shall we say, brothers and sisters? When you come together, each of you has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Everything must be done so that the church may be built up. Now, being part of the Church of Christ, don't get weirded out on the word tongue, okay? Because we know what a tongue is, right? What is it? It's a language. And also, it has an interpretation there. So that means if someone from South America rolls up in Jacksonville and they want to praise God in their native tongue, we got Carla here to interpret. I think it works. Also, I think about, the living room environment. When we were having family devos when our children were growing up, everything was on the table. We talked about God, we talked about what was going on in their lives, and we tried to put it in the context of our faith and the things that we believed in. And I believe this could create an environment where we can do that as a church. I think we experienced some of that last week. When we had Carla and Steve were sharing things that they experienced that you don't hear in church, but I think it was a great example for them as leaders to do that. And then we had a comment that was a little bit different, but it was what a living room church is like. You don't know what you're going to get, but throughout all things, it worked out. So I think it's a great idea. I'm looking forward to it, and, amen.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Ooh, interception. Couldn't help yourself, Marcus. Huh?
I think, when I look at how the growth groups are designed, I think that it just makes sense. I like to sing very loud for people who are around me, may know. So I'm encouraged to be able to actually sing out to everybody else. I think that it's going to be great, but to tie it into what James was saying, I really think that living room format, being able to help build up relationships and just have that stronger one-on-one connection, I really think that the setup is important for it, but I think it'll actually help suit that need. So I think it's great, and I'll be able to see new people.
Okay, awesome. Okay, one more.
That design's pretty cool. It's more than focused on you. It's more of an upgrade for this church. I mean, major, not like a technological upgrade, but more like a spiritual, Jesus worshiping, God worshiping upgrade.
Love it. Well said, sir. Well said. So next steps, what can you do? Well, please pray. Please meditate about ideas. I asked the kids' Quest teachers to give me some ideas of even more ways to interact. And so we're looking for more and more ways to make 1 Corinthians 12:12 a reality. Also, resources. If you have resources, this will take money. We have had one generous donor who wants to help make this a reality. But if you feel specifically inspired, and if you have resources and money, let's use it for God's glory. Talk to me, help me. Oh, because one thing I didn't mention is for the people that are facing sideways, we want to put some monitors there so that everyone has a reference point. This big screen is intentional because everybody in the back, that's going to be their monitor. We'll have several monitors on the side over there. So we want to do this right. We want to really make it an amazing experience for people. And quite honestly, I think we have a chance as a Jack's Church to do something in this generation that is special, where people all around Jacksonville, when they'll come, they're like, what is this? I mean, what is happening here? What is this authenticity? What is this realness where people are mixing and blending all races and generations? And so I think it's really special. If you go online and you do want to give, there's a bucket when you choose general fund or special missions. There's also a living room church initiative if you feel specifically inclined to give to that. But any way you slice it, I could not be more excited for this to happen. We don't have a specific timeline. And hey guys, if this epically fails and is a bad idea, we'll just change the row. We'll just change it back to rows, the chairs, right? So there's no risk, even if you're like, oh, I don't know. There's no risk here, but there's a lot to gain. And I believe that we owe it to God to try to do the best we can to glorify Him. So as we, first of all, thank you guys. Let's give a round of applause to Travis and Yvette for helping me out today.